City of Breslau, spring of 1945. Fierce combat is being waged on German soil, the final battles of our victory. War correspondents carried out their task here and on other fronts. One of them was Vladimir Sushinsky. Here is one of his rare appearances. His workplace was the forward edge of the battle area. Right now, you're seeing footage he filmed during the Battle of Breslau. Here, he was fatally wounded. You see him being carried from the battlefield. After being wounded, he lived for only 5 more hours. Sushinsky's funeral was filmed by cameraman Nikolai Bykov. Several days later, he was also killed in Breslau. The combat cameraman is laid to rest with military honors. Vladimir Sushinsky's comrades in arms accompany his hearse. They know how courageous and unfaltering in battle was their friend. They know how profound was his sense of duty to the people whose feet he had been called to capture. Vladimir Sushinsky was one of the best. He was just like his comrades, who were standing at his tomb. He was one of many. May his story be a story of a man who fought with a camera in his hands. This is Vladimir Sushinsky's camera. His tool during his 3 years at the front, a cameraman's weapon. Like a fighter, he loaded it, turned the machine on, and shot. That's how he served his country. Some of the notes he made accompanying his footage have been preserved. His film stock and footage are a chronicle of the war's events. They are his testament. Here, he captured what he saw, what he found striking, what he deemed necessary to show the people. Sushinsky's footage is now part of history. In this film, we will tell the story of a man who fought with a camera in his hands. A combat cameraman accompanies the troops, and Vladimir Sushinsky's roots followed the fighting. He was on the Volkhov. At the Battle of Leningrad, he fought the Dnieper and crossed the Sivash. He witnessed the liberation of the Crimea. Alongside the victorious army, he crossed the Carpathians and Poland. The Volkhov Front, only 70 kilometers away from Leningrad. The enemy did not advance any further. The Germans were stopped here in the fall of 1941. Vladimir Sushinsky began his work in this area when there was no action. The front was at a standstill. A lighthouse at Lake Ladoga. Its west wall is damaged, and its east wall is intact. The Baltic Fleet sailors carry out the artillery defense of Leningrad. They fight the enemy on land while their ships are at anchor. This is Sushinsky's first footage. He titled it, "The Valiant Are Victorious." These words would make a good epigraph to all the footage made during the war. The scouts are leaving for the enemy's camp to capture a prisoner informant. In the meantime, the Soviet Information Bureau reports no significant changes at the front. The scouts' search efforts. Such was the routine of the battlefield, whose great significance was well understood by the fighters. Sushinsky's camera captures the vast reality of life at the front. These are the Ivanovo weavers who volunteered at the Volkhov front. They understand how important a clean shirt is for a soldier at the front. The front is still defensive, but in the moments of quiet, the fighters prepare the tactics of upcoming offensive battles. The commander presents to the troops an infantry-tank cooperation plan. It was a harsh winter. The Volkhov front lay where the fire had destroyed everything. For many months, Cameraman Sushinsky had worked here. The life of the troops and his own would become one. Their everyday routine would become his as well. The Second Army rifle units and subunits had become accustomed to the man and his camera. The soldiers would forget that they were being filmed, thus making his footage all the more realistic. The Red Army troops taught the cameraman courage and resilience. Sushinsky knew how significant his work was. He held a camera in his hands to capture the inimitable. Time and time again, the people who saved the city of Lenin will come to life for future generations. The siege of Leningrad has been lifted. The Leningrad and the Volkhov fronts have joined forces. Poets, writers, and artists will keep turning to these unforgettable days of war. But Sushinsky's footage will remain forever the only true document of the victory at Leningrad. That is why it is so precious. This used to be a park, and now it is the site of fierce battles. The cameraman wrote about the filming of the battles in the MGA region. The battle for the Poroche township and the eastern part of the local park continued for several days. The battle took place in trenches, in dugouts, in the ruins of the former township. These trenches had recently been seized from the Germans. The units of the 378th Rifle Division have unified here for an attack. Up there, above the troops, an artillery battle is taking place. The intensity of the fire reaches a fever pitch. Look closely at the faces of the soldiers who are hugging the earth in these foxholes. These are difficult moments. Think of the cameraman. He's never in the picture, and we aren't usually aware of him. But he would also like to feel the life-saving proximity of the earth. Yet Sushinsky forces himself to get up and film these people. In his notes to the footage, he wrote, "The filming was done in the actual battle, and my hands and the camera were covered with dust and dirt. Therefore, defects are possible." But there were no defects in his footage. the Dnieper. From here, one can see the last foothold of the Germans on the left bank. This is the forward edge of the battle area. The German tanks have already moved into action. Our anti-tank riflemen are taking their firing positions. The cameraman goes with them, but we don't see him, as always. The tanks are approaching. They are 300, then 200 meters away. Let us freeze the frame. Now the tanks can be seen clearly. Here's what's left of the Germans, defeated on the left bank of the Dnieper. On February 9, 1944, the Sovinform Bureau reported that the troops of the 4th Ukrainian Front had crushed 7 enemy divisions here. This is what their destroyed machinery looked like. In the Cossack village of Bolshaya Lepetika, Sushinsky witnessed children emerging from their basement hideout. He saw them being embraced by the soldiers, as if they were their own children left behind at home. The Roten Sea, the Sivage. The salty, ice-cold ooze of shallow water extends for kilometers. The soldiers and the field engineers are building a bridge from the steppes of Tavria to the Crimean shore. Here, the cameraman sees the fighters' great labor, the resilience and stamina of our people. Some didn't believe the crossing of the Sivage could be successful in early spring, but our command decided to break the German defense right here. The battle has already begun in the Crimean land. Everything seems quiet here, but let us turn on the actual sounds of the battle. Sushinsky included an explanation in his notes. In view of the fact that on April 8, 1944, in the very beginning of the attack, I was knocked senseless by the blast of a burst shell during an artillery strike, the footage is incomplete. This scene was filmed from a tank. The cameraman was unable to walk due to a spinal contusion. But the front advanced quickly, and Sushinsky found a spot in the tank units that stormed their way to the south. Now the battle has come to the eastern slope of the Supun Ridge. That year, the arrival of spring was marked not by sunshine and warm winds, but by the salvo of the Katyushas. Twelve cameramen filmed the battle for Sevastopol. Sushinsky entered the city in the ranks of the 2nd Battalion of the 943rd Rifle Regiment. This was not the first city whose liberation by the Red Army Vladimir Sushinsky had filmed. But this one was Sevastopol. The Red Army troops cross the Carpathians. The cameraman continues his journey with them. Now the roads of Europe have become the routes to battle for our troops. The Russian soldier. He labors in the Carpathian Mountains like a farmer behind his plow. At the bottom of the screen, you can see the cameraman's shadow. He's filming. Such footage normally would not be included in a film, because a cameraman should remain off-screen. But in this film, let the combat cameraman and his characters be together. Together they had seen tears and grief, destruction and death, and now they are seeing together the joy of victory and liberation. But the path ahead to a complete victory would be long and difficult. The soldiers followed the roads of Transcarpathia, which had been washed out by the autumn rains, and the war cameraman walked among them. In the meantime, celebratory fireworks were thundering in their beloved Moscow to mark the glorious victories achieved by these people. The last fall of the war. Wet snow sticks to the lens. Sushinsky hurried to film this steady onward march. By winter, the front advanced high into the mountains. These winter landscapes Sushinsky filmed alongside his friend, cameraman Boris Pumpyansky. They both loved nature. But right now, their attention was drawn to people. These artillerymen came here to the Carpathians from Kuban, from the Don, and from the Kerch Strait. The vast expanses of the liberated land are revealed here. This is the land that the Russian soldiers gave back to the world. This is the last footage ever made by cameraman Pumpyansky. He died while on a sortie. Poland. Sushinsky entered the cities with the forward units. Houses were still on fire. Everything was being burned down and destroyed by the enemy in retreat. The cameraman saw endless grief. He knew that the world needed to see this child's tears, as well as those who were to blame for these tears. Now they raise their hands obediently. The Red Army liberates Europe's enslaved villages and towns. For these people, the horrors of the war are now history, and they know to whom they owe the joy of peace. A short stop at the Krakow town square. There are the cameraman's comrades in arms. Infantrymen always had leading roles in Sushinsky's footage. Together they had traveled thousands of kilometers. Together they had been at the approaches to Leningrad, in the foxholes at the Kursk Bulge. They marched against the enemy tanks at the Dnieper. They had walked in the salty, icy waters of the Sivaj. Together they had fought for the Crimea. In their liberating march across Europe, they had crossed the Carpathians, Poland, and together they arrived in the enemy's land. The city of Breslau, a stronghold superbly prepared by the enemy for a prolonged defense. A fierce battle has begun in the city streets. Every building, every intersection, even the ruins are being fought for. The lens of a single camera cannot capture the scope of this battle. On screen, we can see only certain details of the fight, only the efforts and heroism of individual people. But the multitude of these details create the splendid image of our victory. 150 cameramen filmed the chronicle of these great events. Let us not forget that Vladimir Sushinsky was but one fighter of the large army unit of combat cameramen. Right now, we're seeing only a fraction of our victory, only a short moment in the long years of the war. The soldiers are on the railway bank in Breslau. This was the last frame Vladimir Sushinsky ever filmed. Let us review the footage contained in his last reel and find out what happened from the accounts of his comrades. Vladimir Sushinsky was filming the battle for the railroad tracks. The infantry unit's objective was to seize this part of the railway. At the moment his lens was trained on these two machine gunners, an enemy shell burst next to him. Captain Vladimir Sushinsky, born in 1912, a war cameraman, died as a hero in the battle against the fascist invaders on February 22, 1945. He was decorated with the Order of the Red Banner, the First-Class Order of the Great Patriotic War, and the Medal for the Defense of Leningrad. For his camera work on the fronts of the Great Patriotic War, Vladimir Alexandrovich Sushinsky was awarded the Stalin Prize. Only a few of his film appearances remain, the work of his fellow combat cameramen. May the film shots of the war made by his hand, the film shots in which his mind is alive and his heart is beating, forever preserve the image of the cameraman who captured the heroic years of the Great Patriotic War.